Music Man. Again, an incredible production. I had the opportunity to go last Saturday. Definitely get out and see Phantom of the Opera. Our second presentation tonight is incredibly exciting as well. And I'm very excited to introduce Mrs. Lynn Sugars, who's our business administrator, Mr. John Middleton, who works for Beska & Associates, who's the engineer that we work with in the district, to do a very, very exciting presentation about a building project summary for the referendum that we will be going out to the public on October 2nd, 2018. So, Mrs. Sugars and Mr. Middleton, if you'd approach the podium.
Projects that we've been talking about for some time now. You know, we've been talking about this, I think literally I've been here for a little over a year and a half. We've been talking about this since the moment I got here. So our planned referendum date, as Dr. Malash mentioned, is for October 2nd. And we know that by the end of this month, we need to submit our project applications for the state so that we can start to get that process going. They have to review those project applications, and then we have to get they're okay to move ahead with the project. So we have been working very diligently, Mr. Middleton and myself and other members of the district, to go into the buildings, work with our professionals, talk about what the building needs are, look at you know, what some of the issues are in the buildings, and tonight we're going to talk about some of that. So how do we select the type of projects that we're going to do for this referendum? Well, it started with building visits, Mr. Middleton visiting each of our schools as he developed our long-range facilities plan. As you know, last month we approved our long-range facilities plan, and that was approving the district as it is now. Next board meeting, when we approve our project applications, we will approve a revised long-range facilities plan that will reflect some of the things that we would like to do as part of this process. He also took a look at all of our classroom spaces, how those classrooms are used, how the buildings are used, and what some of the needs are. Also, Mr. Middleton, having been with the district for so long, just sort of has this inherent knowledge of our buildings and what needs to happen, so that helped as well. Mr. Middleton also met with principals, talked to them about the use of their buildings, what type of future programs they may have, what kind of wants and needs they have in their buildings, and how they're using their current spaces. That was followed by visits from both the facilities department, the operations department, myself, going in, looking at the buildings, trying to prioritize as we looked at different things. And also, as you know, we also did, because security was really at the top of the list as we were planning these projects, we did a security prototype at Berkeley Early Childhood Center. We chose Berkeley because it's a very simple building. It's one of our smaller buildings. It was easy to kind of see what works, see what things we might want to change in the future as we would expand that out to our other buildings. So as we went through this process, John has an architect team that is working on getting all of these project applications together, looking at what needs to be done, different kinds of engineers he's working with, and as we sort of formulated all of that together, we categorized our projects into 5 different categories. Instruction, that would include things like small group instruction rooms, security, infrastructure, roofs, HVAC, electrical, hard surfaces. As Dr. Malash has said many times, we could probably do a referendum just on paving and curbing and things of those nature. And then community spaces, auditoriums, gymnasiums, athletic fields, things like that. So those are the 5 categories that we put our projects into. We've also talked about structuring our referendum question. As you know, we can have multiple questions. We know that we can raise about $51 million and not affect the tax levy. And the reason we can do that is because we have some debt that's expiring. So our goal was to limit question 1 to $51 million and to focus on security, health and safety, and building envelope. Question 2 would be other things, and I don't want to say likes to haves because I don't think there's a whole lot as you look at this that are likes to have, but that would be more about building needs and system integrities, and again, putting these projects into the 5 categories that we had selected. So let's talk about our elementary schools first. Berkeley is our early childhood center. As you know, we've already done, as I just mentioned, the security prototype there. So that is not in question one for Berkeley Early Childhood Center. However, there's some other things, again, building envelope type things, health and safety, fire detection and alarm system needs to be replaced there. You'll see a lot of repetition in some of these things that you see. One of them is masonry movement joints. And I'll let John speak to that a little bit about what that is and why that's in question one for us.
So the masonry movement joints are various penetrations through the building plus movement joints in the masonry veneer that allows it to move around. So a lot of your buildings haven't had the joints replaced since they were built. As you can see, this building is approaching 60 years old. So caulking certainly doesn't last that long. So we need to do some maintenance on the veneer and the exterior of the buildings to keep them moving into the future.
Yes, John mentioned this building was built in 1959. It's 32,000 square feet, currently has 278 students in it, and it houses our preschool programs. Question two for this building would be classroom, toilet alterations, HVAC upgrades, water and plumbing replacements, ceiling and lighting replacements. If in some of our buildings, you know that our hallways can be very dark. So brightening up the hallways, having some more lighting, storm drainage and site utilities. These are things that we would do as we did paving. If the parking lot's already torn up, a lot of those kinds of things are under the parking lots. And then paving, sidewalks, building accessibility would also be part of this. If we move on to Clara Barton. Clara Barton was built in 1965, had construction there in 1994 and 2000. It is just over 50,000 square feet, and it has 472 students in grades K through 5. Again, question one, security vestibule cameras and swipe card access will be, at the top of all of our first question. This will necessitate a reconfiguration of the main office. If you've been in Barton, you know that the main office is not near the front entrance. So in addition to the security vestibule, we would reconfigure the main office to be closer to that entrance area. Partial roof replacements in this building, and again, replacing of the masonry movement joints. The current all-purpose room at Clara Barton is 2,740 square feet. The largest all-purpose room that we have in the district is at Stockton, and that's 4,822 square feet. So you can see that although Clara Barton has our largest enrollment of elementary students, we have one of the smaller APRs in this building. The one at Stockton is almost 2,000 feet larger. So that's one of the reasons why when we looked at this building, we took a look at adding a gymnasium onto the back and revamping the all-purpose room to really just be a cafeteria type area. So if we look at Clara Barton, this is the configuration of Clara Barton right now. And this would be the revision with a gymnasium addition on the back and a revamping of the current all-purpose room. And I'll let John add a few notes there.
So some of the work that we're doing, as Lynn said, to facilitate the secure vestibule, we're revamping the office space. So that's the space at the front right of the center of the building. To the left of the center of the building at the front is what is now the multi-purpose room. So part of the project is to pull the stage out of there to give them more functional space as a cafeteria. So that'll be turned into strictly a cafeteria. And then at the back, we're building an all-purpose room, which would be the gym and auditorium as a single-use space.
We move on to our Cooper Elementary School. Cooper was built in 1970 and had an addition in 2000. It's just under 50,000 square feet. It has 231 students enrolled right now, and it serves grades K through 5. And again, security vestibule, cameras, and the swipe card access system. Reconfiguration of the main office. Again, this is another school where the main office is not near the entrance. However, you know, there's kind of a suite of offices there that we can reconfigure and move some things around so that we can put that main office closer to the front entrance of Cooper. Partial roof replacement would be in question one, and again, the masonry work. Some of the other things that we would do in this building, classroom toilet alterations. These are for the toilet rooms that are actually in the classrooms. Then the gang bathroom, toilet room upgrades, HVAC replacements, crawl space repairs, and I'm going to let John touch on that a little bit. As you know, we are currently doing a crawl space repair project at Barton, and this work would be similar to that work.
So the crawl space is generally underneath the corridor spaces of the school, and there's structural distress starting to appear in some of the joists that support the floor. So this is similar to what we have ongoing right now at Barton Elementary School, where we have to replace some of the structural members because of corrosion of the members. They're losing their strength. So we're staying ahead of the curve and going to upgrade the structure in the crawl space.
And again, some of the other things that we saw: plumbing replacement, ceiling and lighting replacements in the hallways, storm drainage and site utilities, again, while we have that paving up, and then some additional paving, sidewalks, and building accessibility. Bret Hart Elementary School. Bret Hart was built in 1967 and had additions in 1968 and 2000. It's just over 50,000 square feet and has 472 students and serves grades K through 5. In this particular case, in order to do the security vestibule, if you're familiar with Bret Hart, you know that the main office is literally across the main hallway from where the security vestibule would be put in at the main entrance. So in this particular building, we would actually be constructing a new main office, which would come out in the front there near the Bret Hart sign that you see there. We would also be doing the masonry movement joints and some small group instruction rooms. We'd actually take the main office that's there now, and we would revamp that into small group instruction room. And again, some of the things that you've seen: classroom toilet room alterations, toilet room upgrades, lintels and precast panels, ceiling and lighting in the hallways, and then storm drainage, site utilities, and paving. So if we take a look at Hart, this is Hart as it is configured now. And this would be some of the additions and renovations that we would do at Hart. Anything to that?
Sure. So the space you see kind of in the orange color, that's the addition, which would be the new main entrance and secure vestibule. And to the top left of that is where the existing office is located. And that's, as Lynn said, that's going to be converted into small group instruction rooms and an enlarged nurse's office.
So Hart has one of our larger all-purpose rooms in this building, so we would not be looking to do an addition on this building in terms of a gymnasium. We look at Johnson. Johnson Elementary School was built in 1966. It had additions in 1994 and 2000, 51,550 square feet with 432 students, and it serves grades K through 5. Again, the security vestibule, cameras and swipe card access with an office reconfiguration. As you know, if you've been in Johnson, the main office is fairly close to the front entrance there. So it would not be, wouldn't have to make a lot of changes to reconfigure the office to be near the front entrance. Partial roof replacement, mason movement joints. In this particular building, because of the size of the all-purpose room, we moved the gymnasium addition out of question 2 and into question 1. Johnson has the smallest all-purpose room in the district, but it has the 3rd largest enrollment. So their all-purpose room is 2,300 square feet, and they have 432 students there. So we felt that it was very important, if you've ever been in that room, which also does not have windows and does not have ventilation, on a hot summer day during lunchtime, you can understand why, we move this back up into question 1. In question 2, we would have small group instruction, again, classroom toilet upgrades, toilet room upgrades, electric service upgrade, including a generator. We have a handful of buildings throughout the district that still don't have generators. remove and replace IFAS panels, storm drainage site utilities, and paving at this building as well. So this is Johnson now. And this would be Johnson with the gymnasium addition on the back. Okay, all right. Moving on to Joyce Kilmer. Joyce Kilmer has a pretty sizable all-purpose room. It is 4,600 square feet. So we wouldn't be making any changes there in terms of an addition. The office is fairly close to the front entrance, so it will be a fairly easy building to add the security vestibule and reconfigure the main office. Partial roof replacement, masonry movement joints in question 1. And in question 2, classroom toilet upgrades, toilet room upgrades, a partial HVAC replacement, remove and replace lintel and precast panels, again, to brighten up those hallways, ceiling and lighting replacements in the hallways, and again, the storm drainage site utilities and the paving at this building. Kingston Elementary School. Kingston is our oldest elementary school. It was built in 1955, had an addition in 1958 and 1962, and really hasn't had any further additions to it since then. It is just under 44,000 square feet, has 402 students, and serves grades K through 5. Again, we would be looking at the security vestibule, camera swipe card access, office reconfiguration. In this particular building, the office is fairly close to the entrance. We can reconfigure some of those offices to put it right next to the entrance. Replace the masonry movement joints, fire detection and alarm system, all in question 1. In question 2, we would be looking at small group instruction rooms, toilet room upgrades, plumbing replacement, another gymnasium addition. The APR in this building is 2,354 square feet, so one of the smaller APRs. Ceiling and lighting replacements, storm drainage, site utilities, paving sidewalks, building accessibility. And this is a place where we would consider expanding the parking because there is a very small parking lot for the staff there. So this is where we would look to add some additional parking. If we look at Kingston as it is currently configured right now, and this is what it would look like if we were to add the gymnasium and reconfigure that front area there where the security vestibule and the offices would be.
So here the offices are a little bit tight, so we're actually expanding the footprint a little bit to create the secure vestibule. But otherwise it's similar to what we've done at the other schools.
Next we have Russell Knight. Russell Knight was built in 1964 and had an addition in 1994 and 2000. It is just under 43,000 square feet. It has 361 students and serves grades K through 5. Again, security vestibule cameras and swipe card access. This is another building where we would have to construct a new main office. If you've been in Russell Knight, you know that the main office is again across the way, across the busy hallway. So we would have to actually construct a new main office. Partial roof replacement and masonry movement joints, all in question 1. In question 2, we'd be looking at small group instruction rooms, toilet room upgrades. This is another building we would want to do a gymnasium addition. The current all-purpose room is just over 2,300 square feet, so definitely one of our smaller APRs. The security office would actually come out of the front of the building. Right there at that entrance, not only do we have the APR on one side, we have a stairwell on the other side. So this one was we had to think about this one when we were designing the new office and the security vestibule. This building would also have HVAC replacements, remove and replace the IFAS panels, ceiling and lighting in the hallways, and again, the storm drainage site utilities and paving. So if we look at Russell Knight now, this is what it would look like with the gymnasium addition and the front entrance addition as well.
So this one was quite a challenge with the congestion at the front entrance, but Steve Bessica and the rest of the architectural team came up with a very workable solution to move the front administrative areas out in front of the existing building, and we actually the site's pretty tight too. Nice site, but the school's pushed to one end of the site, so we looked at fitting the gymnasium on the back corner of it, and it'll work well with the previous addition that was put on the building.
So if we move on to Horace Mann. Horace Mann was built in 1962 and had additions in 1994 and 2000. It's 41,117 square feet. It has 297 students and serves grades K through 5. Again, security vestibule camera and swipe card access with an office reconfiguration. The main office is fairly close to the entrance of the building, so that should be fairly easy to do. Total roof replacement at this building. We have a lot of issues with the roof there, and so this would be a total re-roof in this building. Masonry movement joints, again. In question 2, we'd be looking at small group instruction rooms, toilet room additions, toilet room upgrades. This is also another building where we would do a gymnasium addition. This is another one of our very small all-purpose rooms, just over 2,300 square feet. So we would be looking to add a gymnasium addition. HVAC replacements, electrical upgrades. This is another building that needs a generator. IFAS panel replacement, ceiling and lighting replacements, and again, the storm drainage, site utilities, and the paving. This is also another building that definitely needs some more parking. If you've ever been there during the day, you know that the cars kind of line the street there in front of the building. So definitely a building where we would want to add some additional parking. So this is what Horace Mann looks like right now. And this is what it would look like with the gymnasium addition and the changes to the main office.
Not really much different here. Just in general, when we take the stage out of the existing multipurpose rooms, we end up with about 25% extra space. So that's going to be a nice addition to the square footage available for serving lunches.
If we look at Thomas Paine Elementary School, again, security vestibule, camera, and swipe card access with an office reconfiguration. This will be a fairly easy building to do because the main office is right near the front entrance. Partial roof replacement and the masonry movement joints. In question 2, we would be looking at small group instruction, classroom toilet upgrades, HVAC replacements, electrical upgrade, including a generator, remove and replace IFAS panels, ceiling and lighting replacements in hallways, and then storm drainage, site utilities, and paving. And again, this is another building where we would look to expand some of the paving. Paine was built in 1968. It had an addition in 1994 and 2000. It's just shy of 52,000 square feet. It has 353 students at it, and it serves grades K through 5. This is Sharp Elementary School. Sharp was built in 1964, had an addition in 1968 and 2000. It is just under 45,000 square feet. It has 359 students and serves grades K through 5. Again, question 1, security vestibule, camera, swipe card access, office reconfiguration, partial roof replacement, and masonry repairs. In question 2, small group instruction rooms, toilet room upgrades, HVAC replacement. Again, this is a building where we would look to add a gymnasium. The current all-purpose room is 2,300 square feet. So we would look to add another gymnasium onto this. Remove and replace lintels and soffits. Another building that needs electrical service upgrade with a generator, ceiling and lighting replacements in the hallways, and again, the storm drainage, site utilities, and the paving. This is also another building where we would look to add some additional paving for parking. So this is what Sharp looks like right now, and this is what it would look like with the additional gymnasium. Stockton. Stockton was built in 1970. It's one of our youngest elementary schools. It had an addition in 1994 and 2000. It's just under 55,000 square feet, has 360 students, and serves grades K through 5. Stockton has our largest all-purpose room, just over 4,800 square feet. So this is not a building that we would be looking to have an addition to. However, if you've been in Stockton, you know that the main office is across the hallway from the entrance, and so this was another building that we had to think about in terms of putting in a main office to accommodate a security vestibule at the entrance there. So security vestibule cameras and swipe card access, construction of a new main office, partial roof replacement in this building, and then the masonry movement joints. In question 2, we would be looking at small group instruction, classroom toilet room upgrades, HVAC replacement, replace and remove, or remove and replace lintels and IFAS panels, ceiling, lighting, replacements in the hallways, and then again, the utilities and the paving. So if we look at Stockton now, this is the configuration of Stockton now. And this would be the addition that we would put on, actually physically onto the front of the building to accommodate a main office security vestibule type arrangement.
Yeah, there wasn't much of a place to go with this. This will work out nicely with the existing bus loop driveway and put a focus on the front entrance.
Woodcrest Elementary School. Woodcrest was built in 1958. It had additions in 1982 and 2000. It's 53,185 square feet. It has 372 students, and it serves grades K through 5. Again, security vestibule, cameras and swipe card access with an office reconfiguration. This again will be one of our easier buildings to do that in because the main office is located near the front entrance. Roof replacements, masonry movement joints. In this building, we have some windows that need to be replaced. In question 2, small group instruction, toilet room upgrades, HVAC replacements, soffit replacements, ceiling and lighting replacements in the hallways, and paving, sidewalks, and building accessibility. Okay. We move on to our middle schools. Hvac Middle School. Hvac was built in 1970 and had an addition in 2000. It is 119,504 square feet. It has 883 students, and it serves grades K through 6. Sorry, it's grades 6 through 8. It has, again, we would be looking to do the security vestibule, the camera, and the swipe card access. This would be one of the easier buildings to do it in because there is a suite of offices near the front entrance. And we could do that fairly easy with an office reconfiguration. Entrance canopy. This is probably just to shut me up so that I stop talking about the entrance canopy at Hvac so that you know what door to go into. Partial roof replacement, masonry repairs, and window gasket repairs would be in question 1. In question 2, toilet room upgrades, HVAC replacements, ceiling and lighting replacements, and two things that we'd like to do in this building as well: rehab the media center. You've been in the media center at Hvac. It's in the middle of the building. It doesn't have any natural light. I don't think it's been touched since 1970. And so that would be one thing that we'd like to do there. Also, locker room renovations. We're in the process of replacing some lockers in the coming weeks, but the locker rooms need some attention as well. And again, storm drainage, site utilities, paving, sidewalks, and building accessibility at this building.
So the big thing here was for the secure entrance, we just had to juggle some of the administrative office spaces around to put them in close proximity to what's going to be the new main entrance.
Carusi Middle School was built in 1964. Whoops, there's a reverse there. Had additions in 1967, 1994, and 2000. It's just under 130,000 square feet. It has 958 students, and it serves grades 6 through 8. Carusi, there's a lot of things in question 1 that in some of the other buildings are in question 2. And the biggest issue that we will face at Carusi is the fact that it needs a major asbestos abatement. And as we have delved into this project, I can understand why it hasn't been done up until this point. It's a major, major undertaking. But the bottom line is that it's very difficult to even do general maintenance in this building because of the asbestos issue. This will be a multi-year project at this building that will probably need temporary classrooms for at least 3 years. So I'm going to let John talk about that a little bit more.
So the asbestos-containing material at Carusi is the ceilings. So that prohibits the district from moving anything horizontally. So it makes it difficult to run data horizontally, new electrical circuits horizontally, and do any renovations that require movement across the hallways, along the hallways. So part of the project, the primary focus of the project is to get the asbestos out of the building so that they're uninhibited with maintenance upgrades and changes that they'll face in the near future. So the asbestos ceiling is coming out, and the asbestos floor tiles will come out. They'll be replaced with new finishes, and while that's happening, we'll be doing upgrades to a lot of the systems. So the corridor ceiling, the corridor lighting, HVAC piping and systems, plumbing piping and systems will be replaced while the ceilings are down so that we can take advantage of that. That will also allow them to get a lot of the rooftop utilities off of the roof and into the building where they can be properly serviced and maintained.
So obviously you can see Cruci is going to be a major project, and obviously we can't take the materials out without replacing them. So that's why a lot of the items wind up in question one. You can't take it out and put things in question two to put it back in. So with this particular building, a lot of things are going to wind up in question one. Good news is with the security vestibule, fairly easy to put in here. Again, with a suite of offices there near the front entrance, we can do that fairly easily. But other than that, this is going to be a major project. And in question two in this project, there's not a whole lot left, but some of the sidewalks and pavings, also gymnasium renovations. The gymnasium, I'll let John talk about some of the issues there, but it's in need of repair, and then renovating some of the science labs.
Carusi has a unique roof on the gymnasium. It's kind of a sawtooth pattern for those of you who aren't familiar with the school. It gives complication in replacing the roof and complication in thermal protection of the building. So right now they're experiencing peeling paint, which is primarily because of thermal bridging through the precast concrete plank. So we're looking at solutions to resolve the thermal bridging and give them an updated gymnasium.
If we move on to Rosa. Rosa was built in 1961 and had a renovation in 1999. It is just under 89,000 square feet. It has 799 students, and it serves grades 6 through 8. In this particular building, we would be looking to do the security vestibules. We would actually have to take a classroom and convert it to office space. There's a classroom right near the front entrance there. So we would reconfigure that area, put in a front entrance canopy, partial roof replacement, masonry movement joints. There's also some asbestos abatement that needs to be done, certainly not to the extent that we need to do at Carusi, and I'll let John talk about that. But then also we would have new ceilings and lighting, small group instruction, HVAC replacement, plumbing replacement. And then we'd also be talking about converting the cafeteria to music rooms. Part of the issue here, if you've been in this building, is you know that they use pretty much the back half of the cafeteria to store large musical equipment, to store wrestling mats. It's just basically used as storage. So when we looked at this particular building, we were looking to put an additional cafeteria onto the back and then convert the current cafeteria area to music rooms. But I'll let John talk about the asbestos abatement before we talk about that.
Okay, so Rose's issue is not asbestos in the ceiling, but asbestos in the walls. So we can go horizontally, we just can't get through the walls when we get to them. So part of this project is to remove portions of the asbestos in the walls. So first of all, we can replace the interior doors, which are really a problem for the school because they're coming loose from the asbestos plaster walls. So part of our solution will be to remove the portion of the wall, install new doors, and stabilize the interior walls so that first of all we have a portal to get utilities into the classrooms, and second of all we can mount the door in a stable construction so that we don't have issues with them in the future.
So in the second question, just a few of the remaining items: curbings and sidewalks and paving, storm drainage, and site utilities. If we look at Rosa as it is now, this is the current layout of Rosa. This would be the additional items that we would add. You could see the cafeteria area in the back, conversion of the current cafeteria to music rooms, and then the front entrance area, again, would be converted from a classroom to a main office area.
It was a challenging problem to resolve, but I think architecturally they came up with a very good solution for it. So it gives the music rooms somewhat larger spaces. One of the big things at Rosa is the classroom spaces are very small. So they had very small music rooms, and they were making do with what they had. So this will give them a reasonable music department, and it'll give them an all-purpose room so that they're on par with the other middle schools in the district. So they already have a reasonable gym, and this will give them a cafeteria and well, cafetorium. So it's got a stage just like the other middle schools, and they'll have their cafeteria in there as well.
If we move on to the high schools. High School East, again, built in 1967 with an addition in 1969. 369,107 square feet. It has 2,175 students, and it's grades 9 through 12. The security vestibule at High School East would be a little bit different than some of the other vestibules. If you've been into the main entrance, you know it has a very high ceiling. So this would be more of a containment area as opposed to some of the security vestibules we would be doing in some of the other areas. We would reconfigure the office area to accommodate the vestibule. We would do a partial roof replacement, masonry movement joints, and then some masonry repairs, which I'll let John talk about, and some of the connecting links. We've done some of that work, and we need to do some more of that.
The masonry walls at East have been an ongoing problem for probably almost as long as the school's been around. We've corrected large portions of them. In fact, all of C wing, a 3-story classroom wing, has been corrected, and now all of B wing and some of the connecting links that Lynn mentioned have been corrected, and we're just winding up the most recent project, but there's still a lot of wall repairs that need to be done, primarily because of excessive expansion of the brick compared to the rest of the structure. So it's actually encroaching on the window openings, pinching the windows so that some of them cannot be opened. So this will correct a lot of the ongoing problems with masonry in other portions of the building that haven't been touched before.
In question 2, we would be looking at HVAC replacement, electrical service upgrades, exterior stair reconstruction, ceiling and lighting replacement in the hallways, and then we have a concrete floor settlement issue, which I'll let John talk about. Some locker room renovations, and then some upgrades to the current auditorium. As you know, that auditorium had some water damage in it that needs to be repaired. There are asbestos tile floors in there. The seating hasn't been upgraded in a long time. We'd be looking to upgrade some of the lighting and some of the other features of that room. And then curbs, sidewalks, paving, and storm drainage. But I'll let John talk about the floor settlement issue.
So in a portion of F-wing, which is at the back of the building, improper compaction of the soil underneath the slabs on grade has resulted in the floor settling. That's caused cracking in some of the walls. This isn't a new problem to High School East. We've done repairs to it in other portions of the building, but this is the latest area where that's surfaced. So we'll correct that through a grout jacking process. So they put high pressure grout underneath the floor slab and actually lift it up to correct for the settlement issue.
And High School West, built in 1956 with additions in 1964, 1987, 1994, and 2001. It's just under 300,000 square feet. It has 1,300 students, and it serves grades 9 through 12. Again, question 1, we would have the security cameras, the vestibule, and the swipe card access. You could do an office reconfiguration in this building that wouldn't be too hard to do. Partial roof replacement, masonry movement joints in question 1. In question 2, we would be looking at science lab renovations, HVAC replacements, remove and replace IFAS panels, ceiling and lighting replacements in the hallways, exterior stair reconstruction, locker room renovations, curbs, sidewalks and paving, storm drainage, and site utilities at this building as well. So that is our very long list of all of the things that we would love to do in all of our buildings to make them secure, make them, building envelopes sealed up and keep everything safe and everybody happy. as you can see, when you look at this list, there's not a whole lot of wants on this list. And I know that the big question that I've been asking John every day for the past 2 months is how much is all this going to cost? And obviously, before we vote on these on March 27th, we're going to need to come up with that number. I can tell you this. I can tell you that the security enhancements are going to be about $15 to $20 million, and they are an absolute priority, and they will remain in our project applications. I can also tell you that we are more than likely going to have to limit scope and possibly take some of these items off the list in order to fit within the budget that we have decided to try to live within. We know that we can raise $51 million in question one without affecting the tax levy, and that is because we have some debt that is expiring. Next year will be our last payment on that debt. And we also are trying to keep the second question around that dollar amount. We also know that we have some capital reserve funds that we can use to maybe peel off some of the smaller projects and use those funds as well. So, you know, we know in the next 2 weeks we have a lot of work to do to get those applications done and get the budget where we need it to be. But we wanted to give you an idea of what we're looking at, what the issues are, and what the projects potentially will be in those applications. Do I have any questions? Dr. Wong.
Dr. Wong, you have to come. In fact, if the board members will come back up, would be ideal.
Just want to start with appreciation for your hard work, and I know that you must have spent a lot of time on this. I have this little doubt on, because we have a new tax law, and our state is losing people. I mean, in terms of population, so this is going to be taking a long time. And then I want us to look into, say, the enrollment figures of our student population. If the student population is declining, then currently we have 12 elementary schools. So if in the end we are going to combine some of the elementary schools, then some of the projects should not really proceed, from that time point on. So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we have, as part of the application submission, we have to give them demographics. What does our enrollment look like? What do we project our enrollment is going to be? And so far, our enrollment has been fairly steady in terms of what it is right now. It goes down a little bit one year, goes back up the next. So for now, we're anticipating that our enrollment will stay fairly steady. Lisa.
This may be a little premature, but the Carusi project, as you mentioned, would be a very big undertaking. You mentioned temporary classrooms. Have you given any thought as to what that would look like, how that would work?
I know that we have talked to Dr. Cafagna, and I believe his plan would be to put the sixth graders into, use those temporary classrooms for sixth grade, so that you wouldn't have one grade level that was in temporary classrooms for 3 years. You would just be in the temporary classrooms for your first year, and then you would come back into the building for your second and third year. That's his plan at this point.
Thank you.
I have a specific question regarding Bret Hart and the addition of the security vestibule in the hill. That I'm certain you've thought of that, but is that going to impact?
There's a hill there?
Yeah. Yeah. How is that going to work?
Yep. We have looked at that, and we'll put a retaining wall in, similar to what we did for the 2000 edition. That's built on a retaining wall. So unfortunately, Hart's site is very unique.
It's a crazy site. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's a challenging piece of property to deal with.
And it just seems, I'm glad that you said this. Well, not glad, but realistically that some of this may have to be taken off or whatever, because I'm not any Einstein regarding building or whatever, but it just seems like an enormous list of needs. an enormous list of needs, and so something are going to have to be put on the back burner, unfortunately. But
yeah. I think there were a few schools. I think Sharp was one of them that to do the security vestibule, it would require the APR room to be built to get the office configuration moved.
To actually build a new main office.
Correct.
Stockton would be one. Hart would be one.
Right.
Russell Knight, yes.
But the APR is in question 2. So if question 2 perhaps maybe didn't pass, what we do, what was the backup, or what would we do to get the security? Because that's in question 1.
None of the secure vestibules require the all-purpose rooms as they exist now to be changed. So it's all working within the existing vestibule space and or the existing office or constructing new space. So it's not interfering with the existing all-purpose room as it exists now. So if that doesn't pass, it'll remain an all-purpose room like it does now. And hopefully it will pass, and you'll be able to have a cafeteria and then the gymnasium.
I know I've asked this before, but for the generator replacements, is there any lease purchase opportunity through the state programs we used before?
Not that I'm aware of, Ken. You know, that's a piece of equipment that's got a life cycle to it, so it's not something that they would, and it takes a lot of infrastructure to make those systems work. So.
I just wanted to say, you know, as chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, you know, we've been talking about this for many, many months, and I want to thank you for your work that you've done on it. I know there's been a lot that we don't even know about that has gone on, and so I want you to know that we appreciate what you've done, and having been involved, you know, in the committee and hearing these discussions. We know that this is an extensive list, but it's by no means exhaustive. There are so many more needs that we have that we can't even begin to address at this point. So hopefully what you've presented to us, you know, is a good start and we can fit it all in. I know you're doing your best for that, so thank you for all of that.
And I just want to say, you know, again, a special thank you to Mrs. Sugars and Mr. Middleton and Mr. Bessica, who's here, you know, who's the lead architect that goes through. To Don Bart, you know, who's our director of operations, you know, who's been the boots on the ground for the district, you know, working with John and with the team throughout this process as we've gone through. And again, it's been a formal process that the district has been engaged in, as Lynn says, literally since she got here in July of 2016, and is ongoing, and it's work. There's work that they've talked about up here that I wish had been done in the last referendum or 30 years prior to that, you know, when it needed to be done. It's an incredible amount of work that has got to be done with where we are. There's a lot of difficult decisions and discussions that are going to take place with the board, you know, moving forward onto the 27th, you know, to come forward. Everything as the folks presented tonight will not be able to appear in the 2 questions as right now that we've talked about them. There just is not a financial reality, you know, that those things will fit in. There's a lot of stuff that we have talked about over the course of the last 18 months that we would love to have in here, right? And that comes through that is not here. But there will also be an ongoing plan, not only what the referendum looks like, but then what do we look at in doing in terms of yearly projects and yearly things, you know, that we can build into in where we are. But just incredibly grateful, you know, that Lynn and Don, you know, on behalf of the district, and then, you know, Mr. Middleton and Mr. Bessica, you know, and Mr. Middleton, when they presented back in February, talked about a team literally of 32 people on the outside that have been working on developing these, the plans and the estimates and all that kind of stuff. It's a huge undertaking. You know, it's a huge undertaking. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. This is really amazing, the work that you guys pulled together and all the plans there. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our action. First of all, starting off with our action agenda. And for our action agenda, we're going to start off with Mrs. Seidel to move the curriculum and instruction agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2017-2018 school year. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. Mrs. Sugars, who has to run back to her seat.
Double duty.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Judge,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. Next, I will be moving the BNF agenda. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following: 1, financial reports; 2, resolution for the award of bids. Do I have a second? Oh, wait. Yeah, okay. Do I have a second? Mrs. Scarpolino. And are there any questions?
I was going to say, are we going to talk about the exterior door replacements being approved as an emergency project?
Great point, yes. Can you speak to that?
I certainly can. So if you recall, at our last board meeting, we had rescinded a contract award to a contractor who had been awarded that bid in November to work on some exterior doors throughout the district. And we were very anxious to get that work done. Unfortunately, the contractor didn't hold up his end of the bargain. So we appealed to the county office to do this project as an emergent project, and even though we were out of the 60-day window, they permitted us to go to the second lowest bidder. The second lowest bidder is the bidder that did the security vestibule at Berkeley. It's a bidder that we're familiar with. He is anxious to get started. We're going to meet with him on Friday. And he has already been in touch with the door manufacturer and some other people, so we're hoping that he can expedite this project and get it done fairly quickly.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? If not, Mrs. Sugars.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Judge,
Yes to both.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
I need to abstain from Beato Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Must abstain from Bancroft NeuroHealth on the bill list. Yes to the remainder.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have our human resources, and Mrs. Judge, will you move the human resources agenda?
Yes, I will, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following: termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, assignment salary change non-certificated. Number 6, other compensation certificated. And number 7, other motions. This is Adrian. Were we gonna, did I need to make a change on something, or were we gonna have a handout, or? We have a handout. For this, is it for the work session or is it for this? We have a handout. Okay, we have a handout adding to number 5. And it was a date change, if I recall. It is. And so we have a handout. Do I have a second? Mrs. Seidel, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Judge,
Yes to all.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong.
I need to abstain from number 3, involving Rowan University. Yes to the rest.
Thank you, Mrs. Judge. And next we have policy and legislation, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Scarpellino to move that for us.
Certainly, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, and bullying investigation decisions. Number 2, first reading of policies. But please note on number 2 that draft policy 8467 weapons, the second paragraph, we are amending it so that it will read policy number 8469 in place of policy number 7446. And also we have an additional item on the green sheet. Number 3, approval of resolution on underfunding and state aid to schools. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Dr. Malash, do you have something to say about number 3 for us?
I do. I have a couple of comments actually about number 2 and number 3. So one of the pieces in item number 2 with the draft policies, weapons, and the second policy, school security program, is the rewrite of the policy that provides for our campus police officers to be armed while they're in serving as campus police officers in our school. We currently have 4 campus police officers that are in the employee of the district, 2 that are assigned to each of the high schools. So the revision of these policies will allow those 4 campus police officers to be armed while they're working, but also allow our district director of security to be armed as well to go through. So that's a significant change. And the second one, the handout that you did, the green sheet, the approval of resolution on underfunding and state aid to schools. The board adopted a similar resolution on February 28th of 2017. And that we did a certified resolution and then sent on to our legislators. As we know, the discussion about fair funding is something that has been ongoing in Cherry Hill. We did receive an additional little over $1 million last July in terms of funding, dollar per dollar, more than almost any other district in the state. So tonight we're asking the board to approve this resolution. Tomorrow, assuming that the resolution is approved, Mrs. Sugars, as the board secretary, will do a certified resolution, and then we'll send it with a formal cover letter to the governor and to our legislators as well, with the encouragement to continue with the additional funding for Cherry Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Mr. Goodwin.
one thing, is that resolution also going to be posted on the website?
Yes, assuming that it's passed, that people vote for it and it gets approved, we will post that, and I'll post the cover letter that we send to our legislators as well. We'll put it up on the website tomorrow.
Any other questions? Mrs. Sugars?
Mrs. Scarpellino?
Yes to all.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Judge?
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson?
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Okay.
Real quick, before we move on to our work session, can we also post your presentation this evening? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we don't have any items for strategic planning, so we're going to go ahead and move on to, we already had our major item at the very beginning, so we can skip that one from now. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and move on to our committee reports for our committee meetings, and we'll start off with Mrs. Seidel for the curriculum and instruction.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. So I'll apologize in advance because my report is long this month. We had a lot to cover in our curriculum and instruction meeting, which was held on March 5th at 7 p.m. As usual, we had a full agenda. First item we discussed was a Eureka math pilot update. This is a math program that's being piloted at 2 of our elementary schools. We're currently in year 2 at Johnson and year 1 at Russell Knight. And there's a shift in focus on how the math is taught to the students, and the reasoning behind it is if students understand the why of why they're doing things, it will come easier to them. So there's some initial results are encouraging. This was initially rolled out to grades 3 to 5 only at Johnson. That is now moving to all grades 1 through 5 for Johnson. And the next step is at both Johnson and Knight is to add a technology component to that pilot. There will also be a selection of 2 additional elementary schools to participate in the pilot of Eureka Math. We do have other elementary schools, Bret Hart being an example, that are using a different math program called Envision 2.0. They're not necessarily seeing the same improvement that we're seeing at Johnson. So this is something that administration is looking into. Next up, we had a theatrical production approval for the production of Peter Pan at High School West. It will be held on April 12th, and it's performed by the Circle Club. So we hope you all will join us April 12th at Cherry Hill West. Next, we had an update on a research study entitled The Effect of Self-Monitoring of Behavior on Academic Achievement. Ms. Keller, who is a special education teacher at Cooper Elementary, is requesting the ability to conduct research as part of her master's thesis. She will study self-monitoring behavior and how it affects academic achievement. 4 students will be selected and will participate, and the program will be implemented for 10 weeks. 2 of those 10 weeks will be collecting baseline data. At our C&I meeting, we received an outline of her research and the proposed letter to parents and the agreement that parents would have to sign to participate. And you can expect to see this on the action agenda in 2 weeks. Next up, we talked about our summer programs for 2018. Mrs. Minjin provided an overview of all of the upcoming summer programs. We have our PSAT, SAT, ACT, and college essay courses that will run at High School East with a variety of sessions and times to meet most everyone's schedules. The summer enrichment program will also run at East the first 2 weeks of August. There will be morning and afternoon sessions. Classes include photography, art, and drama, among others. And there will also be a summer music program running at West in June and July. Information will be sent out to the parents and community after approval at the action meeting in a couple weeks. So the community should be on the lookout for that information soon. Next, we talked about middle school summer reading. The C&I team collected feedback from last summer's summer reading and used that to plan for the 18-19 summer reading agenda. Students and teachers were interested in new titles. 4 new titles were proposed this year by Mrs. Kasikis and others. They are, for 6th grade, Fish in a Tree by Linda Mullally Hunt. 7th grade, The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown, and Counting Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan. And in 8th grade, Running Dream by Wendelin Van Dranen. In addition, the assignment for 6th grade students was revised based on articulation work done during the school year, and the C&I committee all had homework assignments. My homework assignment is to read The Boys in the Boat, so have not started yet, but I will have it done by the deadline. Next up, we talked about family life curriculum for K through 5. Dr. Mahan and Mrs. Minjin provided an overview of the curriculum and the resources aligned to the curriculum, the materials that they'll be using in the classroom. This curriculum overhaul was revised to address inconsistencies across the elementary schools. I know that we've been talking about this since I've been on the board, so it's been something that's been in the works for quite some time. Discussion included topics that are covered in the curriculum, which I have a copy of, and and will be uploaded to Rubicon Atlas for you all to take a look at. So again, discussion included topics that are covered in the curriculum and staff designated. We talked about the staff designated to provide the instruction, which includes guidance counselors, health and physical ed teachers, nurses, and classroom teachers. As I mentioned, it will be uploaded in Rubicon Atlas for all of you to review, and once we approve it at the action meeting, it will be available for the community and parents to review as well. Next, climate surveys. Dr. Mahan reviewed survey results, which you all received in your Friday packet. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. These surveys were conducted in collaboration with the Qualia Institute. As you know, we do a significant amount of work with Dr. Qualia, in the district. The survey results were shared with staff at East and West in small focus groups, PLCs, et cetera. That same process is happening at the middle school. These groups are taking away from those meetings, what are we learning from the climate survey data? How do we unpack that data, take actionable steps, and follow up with the students? This work is ongoing in the district. It will continue definitely into next year with PLCs at the high school and then flowing down to the middle and elementary schools. Next, we talked about Cherry Hill Public Schools mental health initiatives, and I thought this was one of the more interesting parts of our discussion from my perspective. So the C&I committee, in light of recent events and discussions within the community, had asked the administration to provide an overview of the services and supports available to students in our district. So the comprehensive list was shared with the full board in our Friday night packet, but I definitely wanted to just read through some of those. Take a minute. Sorry, I have a lot of supplemental documentation here. So again, I think this was a valuable exercise as a board member to see all of the services and supports we offer to our students on a one page. So I'm just gonna run through them really quickly, and then we can talk about them in more detail during our discussion. So these are the current activities that we have within the district. We have behavioral screenings with Behavioral Health Works. New Jersey is an active consent state, so parents do need to give consent for students to take this, to have this screening administered. So what I thought was interesting, I know as a parent of a high schooler, I know the letter went out recently in the past couple of months at least. So I naturally assumed, in light of recent events, that we saw an uptick in these applications coming back, and I was very surprised to hear that we did not. I think the number was something like 10 to 12% of our students actually participate in this behavioral health screening. So definitely should talk about that to see how we increase those numbers. Our S12 procedure, which all board knows is for suicidal ideation or homicidal threats. We have student assistant counselors, which we call SACs, in the middle and the high schools, and these SACs provide targeted counseling and remediation for students in crisis. We have 6 in the district. Effective school solutions. An important goal of ESS is to assist in providing teaching staff with knowledge and skills needed to work effectively with students with emotional and behavioral problems. These services are available at the alternative high school, East, West, Rosa, and Hart. We have school guidance counselors. As of the 2017-2018 school year, we have full-time guidance counselors in every school in the district. Mental health task force. The district committee, this was a committee generated by the district in 2003 as a result of suicides that occurred in the community. It used to meet twice per year, and I'm happy to hear that this is starting up again. So by the end of the 2017-2018 school year, the district is committing to having at least 2 meetings before the end of this school year. So that was great to hear. INRS, Intervention and Referral Services. This provides for a coordinated system in each school for the planning and delivery of services that are designed to assist students who are experiencing learning, behavior, or health difficulties. New as of July 2017, we have Mrs. Minjin, who's our Pupil Services Supervisor. She's responsible for pupil services not related to special education, which includes mental health supports. And I know Mrs. Minjin assisted in putting this very comprehensive report together for me. Student advocates. We have full-time student advocates housed at both high schools, East and West, and they're responsible for ensuring that all students have equitable access to educational opportunities for success and monitoring the progress of at-risk students. Almost done, I promise. We have a district psychiatrist. That's a contracted service. And this psychiatrist is in our district 1 day a week to provide clinical services and consultation. QPR training, question, persuade, and respond. This training addresses myths and facts about suicide. It'll also provide signs and symptoms workshop, which is mandatory for all new staff and completed annually at orientation. And I know a while back, Zone PTA and all of the PTAs participated in some of this training as well. And then we also have a peer leadership program in several of our schools throughout the district. We have one at Cherry Hill West, at Rosa, at Carusi, at Kingston. I believe there are peer leadership program at several other of the schools as well. And one of our takeaways was to identify how many schools in our district have them, how many don't, and why they don't, and can we start these peer leadership programs in the schools that don't. And then the last thing that we're currently doing, We Tip. It's an anonymous tip line used in school districts that provides a personalized program that mitigates, deters, and controls inappropriate and dangerous conduct. And while we have all of these great initiatives, there's also always room for improvement. So a couple of things that are on our docket to pursue for July 2018, mental health first aid for counselors. Mental health first aid teaches you how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental illness and substance use disorders in your community. And Mrs. Minjin will be attending a mental health first aid training this summer, and then we'll turnkey that to all the counselors in the district. So I'm excited about that. And then lastly, this is a mobile app that some community members talked about last week that we already had been looking at in the district and had some technical challenges, but it's a mobile app that provides an anonymous incident reporting platform most commonly used in school districts to offer anonymous HIB reporting, and I believe we have a plan for rolling that out. So I know that was a lot. I still have a few more things to cover. I'll move more quickly. But again, I would like to thank Mrs. Minjin and administration for putting that together. I think it was really important for us to have that discussion at CNI in light of recent events. And again, the safety and security of our children is always our #1 concern. 2 more things, I promise. Perkins. We talked about Perkins funds and crossroads for application. So Perkins, we get from Perkins what we call CTE funds for career and technical education. And we're going to refuse the funds this year. We've been talking about this for a couple of years since I've been on the board. Our current CTE course offerings are some of our business classes, commercial arts, photography, sustainable design. During our consolidated monitoring in previous years, we've had some findings that we had to correct in order to support our use of these Perkins funds. We've corrected those findings, but there's been increased federal oversight that's requiring additional changes in how you can use these funds and run these classes that we just can't implement. The DOA has advised that some things are end of course assessments must be industry based. They're requiring a 3-course sequence. And perhaps the biggest reason that we're going to refuse these funds is these new regulations would place limits on the number of students that are able to participate in these courses, which we certainly don't want to limit student involvement in these types of courses. So the good news is our current program structure and curriculum will continue to be delivered at both East and West, even in spite of not accepting Perkins funding. And then the last thing we talked about was the clarification of the spring 2018 park schedule. High schools will begin testing on Monday, April 16th, as opposed to Tuesday, April 17th, which we originally announced. So a revised park testing schedule was provided and probably is or will be posted. It is great, it's already out there for the community. We also got a complete master assessment calendar, which includes access for L's, park, AP testing, NJSLA science testing, DLM, and high school finals. Again, I'm assuming that is or will be posted in the near future. We did have 4 community members, which is exciting. That's a lot for us at CNI. So a lot of the discussion from the community was around the family life curriculum that we talked about a little earlier. Some folks asked what's the process for how curriculum moves through the process and where and when do parents give input into the curriculum. We had a parent that was concerned about the research project that I talked about earlier and possible stigma associated with the students that are selected to participate in that additional testing. Excuse me. And that same parent also had a question about how we will include the, how we will roll out the family life curriculum to our special needs students. and how we need to make sure that we keep the special needs students' needs in our curriculum discussions. We did have a parent comment on the mental health initiatives, that it was great to see so many of these initiatives at our high schools, but that many times that intervention is too late. And you know, how do we identify things earlier? How do we educate our teachers, and how do we work to eliminate the stigma associated with these initiatives? We talked a little bit about how the amount of students participating in the survey, for example, is low because the students, you know, I use my own daughter as an example. You know, she's like, no way am I doing that. No, so we definitely need to work on how we overcome that stigma. And then we had an additional parent comment about the importance of establishing trust between administration and families in order for families to be willing to trust us and have their children participate in these mental health initiatives. So I was very happy to have members from the community at our meeting. And that's my report. Any questions or discussion? Ms. Scarpolino.
The listing with the summary of the mental health was, I thought, excellent. It was concise, and I didn't even realize all the things we offered. I'm just wondering, is there a way we can have that posted on the website so people would know about it, or even to the extent if you know, it's something where a parent can reach out to somebody about a particular thing, a link to the person, or at least information on who the person would be they should contact if they're interested in a particular program?
I know that we have a link on our website for student support services right now. I think the plan was to make sure we discuss this as a full board, and then this information will certainly be shared with the community. I'm also sure that a lot of this will come up in the safety and security community conversations that we're having over the next couple weeks. So, yes.
Great, thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Griffin?
Along those same lines, is there any plans that, or could we think of plans to maybe proactively push it out to people? I know, like, we have our, maybe as a link to one of the communications that goes out on a weekly basis, or something like that?
I think that's a fabulous idea. I'll defer to Dr. Malash and Dr. Mahan on that one, but I would agree. Anyone else? Mr. Tomlinson.
Just more of a comment, just something to, you know, the refusal of the Perkins funds, in that, you know, we don't want to refuse funds, but we've talked for a number of years on how difficult and how the amount of funds we receive really eclipse the amount of administrative back-end work that needs to go into just reporting on these. And just quick back of the envelope, it's 0.03-ish% of, you know, the overall budget. So you know, if we can eliminate some of that administrative headache. And the other big thing is maintain and even expand this program on our own, rather than restrict it to maintain a very small amount of funds.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I did neglect to give the dollar amount. So it was, as you said, a very small amount of our overall budget is about $67,000 that we're talking about. Anyone else? Okay, back to you, Mr. Goodwin.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and make up for your time. I don't have many items to report, but the one key thing is that we did have a preliminary kind of a talk about our budget. We won't really have real numbers or real things to really be able to present until next week. After Thursday, we get our budget numbers, and then we'll really be able to look at the budget in detail. A couple of highlights that I was happy to hear, that are adds, at least potential adds to the budget, are the B teams at the middle school, and we're looking at adding some language, world language teacher. Also, we're coming up to this year, we have need to go back and redo our food service bid, so we have to put that out to bid, and there's a new state process for RFPs that we're going to need to follow, so that's going to be coming up soon. and the last item I had was that we were just going to have the referendum presentation, and we had that today. Those are the major items I had. Well, I did want to, and one of the things that we also passed today that just happened was around the doors at East. That project is underway, or is about to get underway. We were able to get through the contract issue. And then also there's there was issue with the roof over the auditorium at East that's in the process of being fixed or needing to be fixed. And there's a couple of items like at Kilmore and Barton in terms of the dugout. At East, there's dugouts that need to be updated, and there's a couple items at Kilmore and Barton in terms of some construction that needs to take place there as well. Those were the main items that we discussed. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, now we're going to move on to human resources and Mrs. Judge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I'm also going to be pretty short as usual. So the Human Resources Committee met on March 6th, and as I usually state, most of what we discuss in HR is confidential. One thing that I can mention is that we did discuss increasing the substitute secretary salary hourly rate starting with the 18-19 school year. Substitute secretaries have not had an increase since 2002. Substitute teachers and educational assistants are paid in accordance with the contract with Source for Teachers. And regarding the confidential HR matter at East, this matter is just like any attorney-client privilege or doctor-patient confidentiality. However, we can state as a general proposition that neither the superintendent nor the Board of Ed have the authority to terminate a tenured teacher. I'll also restate what our board attorney stated on February 27th board meeting, which is any administrative leave is with pay. So that's the only comment I have regarding that. And our next HR meeting will be on April 10th. Any questions? Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Goodwin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Judge. And now for being policy and legislation, Mrs. Scaparlino.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I won't be as long as Mrs. Seidel, but probably not as short as Mrs. Judge. So the Policy and Legislation Committee met on Monday, March 5th at 6 p.m. We discussed the updates to all mandated policies and regulations that were done for sections 0000 through 1000 of the Policy and Regulation Guide. Dr. Campisi updated the committee regarding the review of these policies, bylaws, and regulations. All mandated bylaws, policies, and regulations in the series are up to date, and Dr. Campisi is working his way through the various sections of the policies and regulations and updating them as necessary. We also had a presentation by Dr. Mahan. She presented an updated version of the procedures for the recommendation of instructional materials. This was basically there's a new instructional form, not that the instructions themselves are changing, but it did add some language about homophobia, and but by and large it was just adding language or changing language as needed. Next, we moved on to policies and regulations for first reading. The first one was Policy 5512, which is harassment, intimidation, and bullying, a mandatory policy. The committee discussed the changes mandated by the New Jersey Department of Education that must become part of the HIB policy. And we talked about some of this I reported on before, but there's some language changing, adding language such as about power imbalance, but it doesn't change the definition of bullying. It also gives principals the ability to sort of assess a situation to determine if it is requires a HIB investigation or whether it's a code of conduct or some other type of incident. Talks about how staff can't be investigated by someone of their own bargaining unit, which we already do that, so that's not an issue. And also talking about protecting students who either sexual orientation or gender identity might not be known to their parents, so ensuring that when we are talking with parents, we are not outing a student. So we add language to that effect. And also some information regarding changing or clarifying when there are deadlines. So parents have 60 days to request a repeal, and then within 10 days, though, that appeal must be heard. So I think, all in all, good changes to the policy to help make it function better. Next, we talked about policy 2431, athletic competitions. We revised this policy. Again, this is something I've reported on in the past, but we discussed the addition of language in the policy stating, and I quote, beginning with the graduation class of 2022, the district will not provide coaching, supervision, or transportation for any individual competitors that wish to participate in events leading to individual non-team state titles or awards in sports not offered as part of the district athletic program. So we agreed to move this forward for first reading to the full board. That would basically be this year's 8th grade class. And again, we added that language because students who are already in high school and have competed under the old policy, we didn't want to penalize them, but now going forward as you enter high school, this is the new policy in place. Next was policy 5533, student smoking. This is another mandatory policy. New legislation has mandated that the boards of education adopt language regarding smokeless tobacco on school grounds. The language added to the policy is as follows, and I quote, a sign indicating that the use of smokeless tobacco is prohibited in school buildings and on school grounds will be posted at each public entrance of a school building. The sign will be clearly visible to the public and shall contain letters which contrast in color with the sign. And then there has to be consequences added to the code of conduct regarding any student using smokeless tobacco on school grounds. So again, they decided we needed to add language about this because any future lawyers among our student bodies might parse the words if it only said smoking and they were actually using smokeless tobacco. And we did agree to move this on to the full board for first reading. And then next, well, we did not have any policy for revision, second reading or adoption this month. Then the next policy that we discussed was a waiver of policy 2340, which is field trips. Cherry Hill High School East and West both have students. I think East had 20 and West had 10 students who made it to the international competition for DECA in Georgia, so that's very exciting, and they will be going in April and missing 3 days of school. Then we talked about, under new business, policies and regulation pertaining to the planned national walkout and demonstrations that are scheduled for 3/14, which is tomorrow, 3/24, and 4/20. We discussed the dates for these walkouts and the fact that students will want to participate and show support against gun violence. And we discussed how these will be handled, the school principals. So for each of the high schools and middle schools, they've worked with and are collaborating with their student leaders to design the events, basically, and how the students would participate, and also for students who don't want to participate, what options would be available for them, what they could do during that time. Any plans to show support by the students will be done on the school grounds. So they won't be leaving the school grounds. And in the Friday package this week, we did get the various plans from different schools that the principals and the students worked out that they want to do to acknowledge their support for not only Parkland, but against school violence, gun violence. And last week we did have some members of the public there, and some members of the public did raise some concerns regarding the process for policy development and revision of policy. In particular, some concerns about policies that may affect our special ed students and how to participate in that. So I think we had a very good and constructive discussion about receiving their input, and are hoping that we will be seeing people interested in that, and from the Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA at all of our monthly meetings now. And that was pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you. Back to you, Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you. Next, we have strategic planning, but I know that meeting was actually canceled because we had the board meeting that night. But is there anything that you'd like to present or give?
No, I have nothing to present. We didn't meet, and Mrs. Sugars and Mr. Middleton gave the entire presentation that was going to be given at our meeting. So, kudos to you two. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have our second public comment session. If you would like to speak, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Next we have our second public comment section. If you'd like to speak, you can speak now on any item. We just ask that you come to the microphones and say your name clearly, name and address clearly. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer will turn, will start off green when you begin, and it'll turn yellow when you have 30 seconds left, and the timer will be red when your time is up, and we ask you to please conclude your comments. All right, Mrs. Wilson has the list? Okay. All right, Mrs. Wilson has the list.
We have a very short list tonight, but I just wanted to note that we'll let our student speaker who signed up speak first. That would be Justin Prochodko. I'm sorry, I mess up the name every time.
Hello, my name is Justin Prochodko. I live at 1151 Chanticleer. It's now been 19 days since the unjust suspension of Mr. Locke. As you can probably tell by now, this educator means the world to me and many of my peers. Mrs. Judge, you just said that you guys don't have the power to terminate a teacher, but you guys do have the power to reinstate him, which is all I'm asking for. Last week, Dr. Malash said words matter, and I'm asking all of you guys to kindly listen to my words. I implore you guys to reinstate this teacher, because not only does he mean so much education-wise, he means a lot to me on a personal basis. I mean, he was always there to have a conversation with me, and he just means the world to me. I implore you guys to right this wrong and reinstate Mr. Locke. My mother always told me to count my blessings every day, and I do, because I'm very blessed to live in Cherry Hill, and where we can have these meetings and all, and discuss these situations that's going on. So once again, thank you guys for your time.
And we have 3 adult speakers who have signed up this evening. First, I have Shiri Sala, then David Rossi, then Miriam Stern.
Shiri Sala, 18 Weston Court. I'm here today on behalf of my student who asked me to come speak with you about an assembly that was held at Cherry Hill East today. I do believe that your intent was a good one. I know that there are a lot of efforts being made to try to kind of right the wrong of not discussing the Parkland shootings and empowering the kids to feel in control. However, I do believe that the speaker really hit the wrong note today. It was a very traumatic experience for my child and for her peers. Right now she's in her bed under covers and doesn't want to go to school ever again, and I've never heard of this from her before. She loves school. I don't know if you're aware of what the program consisted of. First of all, no teachers were prepared, so no teachers knew what was going to happen, so they were not able to talk to the students afterwards. Same mistake that's already been made a few weeks ago. The assembly started with a movie that reenacts a Columbine shooting, and the speaker said something like, "You guys can handle this, you watch violent movies all the time." The message of the assembly was, don't survive a shooting, win a shooting. I don't understand how that message can be given to high school students. They don't want to experience a shooting, and they certainly don't want to win a shooting. They were told they shouldn't hide. I didn't realize this, but apparently the way she's been dealing with her anxiety up until now is she just figured if some shooter came to the school, she would hide. They were told they shouldn't hide. To this date, there still has not been a live shooter exercise at Cherry Hill East since the Parkland shootings. There was one where they just close the door and keep teaching. There hasn't been one where they turn off the lights and hide. So they still don't know what to do in the case of an active shooter, but now they know what not to do, and now they're terrified. I just think this was the wrong message, the wrong tone. A lot of graphic information was shared. There were a lot of heroes were featured. The point of this man seemed to be, look at all these hero kids and teachers. My daughter doesn't want to be a hero. I don't want her to be a hero. I don't want her to deal with this at all. So as you're making these changes and trying to improve communication, please investigate and find out how this person was hired, what this assembly was about. It was just not the right thing. It's been about 20 years since I went to graduate school, and I still remember a book about crisis intervention in the schools. I still remember it was a greenish blue cover, and the name of the woman was Diane Small. And the first rule is you don't do anything in an assembly. You have small class discussions with a connected adult, like Mr. Locke, frankly, that the kids can trust to discuss scary issues. You don't put them in a huge assembly with a stranger, with a SWAT team type of guy, a cop, and scare them half to death, and then not have their teachers be prepared to talk to them about what they just witnessed. So this is just not the right thing. The biggest irony of all, just to connect with the young man who spoke, is that Mr. Locke was put on paid administrative leave for saying something that scared one child, one girl in that class, and the speaker that was hired by this board or by whoever hired him scared to death the entire school. Nothing good came out of that assembly. It was not the right move. And so I hope that you'll investigate and learn more about it and perhaps address it. I know you're making efforts, just the disconnect is still there. So please just keep thinking about what you're doing. I don't know if guidance was involved. I don't know who made this decision. It was not the right decision. Thank you.
So good evening. My name is David Rossi. I live at 102 Roanoke Road. I really wasn't going to talk much about security this evening. I was kind of going to wait till this Thursday at 2:30 at Hvac Middle School. And again, the following Thursday on the 20th and the 28th, Caruso and then Rosa. So I think that's a place where we can have a conversation. But my daughter, too, recently, not today, came up to me and said, you know, Dad, I'm scared to go to school. She's a senior. My only response to her was, you don't have to go if you don't want to. If you are scared, you don't have to go. She said, but I'll fail. I said, well, we'll figure it out. We know with what we've seen with the meetings that you're having with the safety, security, conversation meetings, we know that there's effort. And we appreciate that effort. We do. You know, I guess we'll find out more on the first meeting, which is Thursday at 2:30 at Hvac Middle School. Excuse me? Isn't the 7 o'clock one for the coffee and conversation with you? Oh, I got them flipped around. Sorry. Okay. So we know you're making efforts. There's a lot of communication. And I'll have a lot of questions at those times regarding security. One thing about security I'd like to mention is, you know, arming, you mentioned it in what you guys were talking about, arming you know, the security staff there, police officers. I myself am an advocate of it. However, there is a population and a number of family members and groups that do have their concerns. We listen. We must listen to their concerns, whether or not they're a segment of our population that is struggling with a lot of things that they see with law enforcement, and or if they're the special needs population and those families. I think we need to have that conversation. We need to bring them into the fold, to listen to them and to hear them and support them. To what it was, the plan that was discussed this evening as far as a clear vision for the future and the two questions. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of work. And I know all of you, when you were, you know, won the position that you are in, I know you all, every one of you, walked each and every one of these schools, every one of you, to understand exactly what is needed in our schools. Okay? You have done the work. You've walked the schools. If you haven't, I would suggest that you do each hallway. There's been a lot of work done that pinpoints how much work that needs to be done. I think the conversation really, we need to have a conversation about a clear vision for the future. How do we replace some of these schools? I think we need to have that conversation. I really do. But again, there'll be conversations where we can have a dialogue coming up in the days and the weeks to come about that and about what is asked of us. And that's it. Thank you.
Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road. I feel like we might as well just photocopy the same sheet every week and the same people keep wanting to speak. First of all, I want to just really acknowledge that there are successes and failures with the efforts that you all are making, but regardless, you're making them, and I think, you know, many of us have been screaming and begging for them, and they're starting to happen. There's more transparency and there's more communication, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. And we're in the it's a step of a long road that I hope will continue. Regarding the security measures, I'm curious to see if the federal government and now our state government, especially with the governor's proposed budget, will have funding for schools. And maybe not yet, but I know that there have been other schools in this area that in the past have gotten funding for cameras. And I think it's well worth exploring, considering that it's a huge part of question 1. So that's just something to put out there. Also, on behalf of following up on Chris Benedetto's strong request last week, I'm very excited to see this. I understand it's not new, but it's nice to see it reiterated. And my only request is that when this is delivered to the people that it's planning to be delivered to, is that you consider delivering copies of the signatures from the petition as well, because that truly would be the community and the board and the administration working together on the fair funding issue, which is what we have been told needs to happen. It has to be a joint effort. So why not present the joint effort as a start? The last request and suggestion would be to also show perhaps not just the presentation that we had to see tonight, and I say had because it was so depressing to see that. I'm sure many other people feel that way. And I've walked in those, quite honestly, really disgusting bathrooms through many different schools, and the lighting, which feels like I'm in the subway in New York City. You know, these things we can't even get to because we don't have the money. So having the presentation be shared as well with some of these decision makers, our assembly people, perhaps our governor, and perhaps of photos of some of the bathrooms that we deal with, some of the lighting situations, our gyms. Our gyms weren't even mentioned on there. I think that would also be a really important step towards fair funding. I don't know how many of our decision makers have actually been in some of those rooms. I know, unfortunately, there's only one bathroom I'll use in the elementary school, and I lived in places where there were only squat toilets. So I can tell you, I don't have a problem using an outhouse, but in our school, I will only use one bathroom, and it's the bathroom in the nurse's office, and that's pretty sad in our elementary school where my kids go. So if you can please also bring that information. I think the visual is really powerful. I know it was for me tonight, and that wasn't even photos, it was just the words. So thank you for your efforts.
That's the end of the list, but is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Eileen Doring, 47 Bryn Mawr Avenue, Cherry Hill, and I just wanted to say something, a positive thing I've been seeing happening is that I started a couple months ago to try to get to as many meetings as I could get to, you know, with 4 kids and all of that. And the first time I went to policy and C&I, it was by myself. I was one person, and it was kind of intimidating because it's me and everyone else. But I was so thrilled that, you know, now, you know, come a couple months later, we're in March, and there were 10 people at the policy meeting. So, 10 times, and there were 4 that stayed even after that, because they're back-to-backs, stayed for the C&I meeting. And I think that is so great. And, you know, we don't always agree, but we feel very welcome. I know we talked about it afterwards, some of us that were there. We do feel welcome, we do feel heard, and we appreciate the dialogue that we're allowed to have at those meetings. You know, it's not just like we're doing tonight. We do have some back and forth exchanges, and we really appreciate that, and we come out of it with a better understanding to share with our, you know, our communities and each other. And so thank you for making that a place that we do feel welcome, and hopefully more people will start coming, and there can be more dialogue so that we'll better understand what you're doing, and you'll also better understand our needs and concerns. And I think that just benefits everybody. So thank you so much.
Anyone else? Okay. If not, do I have a motion? Oh, did we, all right. If not, can I have a motion to adjourn? Oh.
Yeah, just thank you. So a reminder, and Mr. Rossi brought it up, so we have a number of community conversations coming up. I have one Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Wilson, at 2:30. At 2 to 3:30 here at the boardroom. It's just a regular community conversation, Cherry Hill 2020, talking about referendum and the project. Thursday night, we're at 7 o'clock at Beck Middle School in the cafeteria, and that safety and security discussion will go through. On Saturday morning from 9 to 10:30 at Sharp Elementary School, again, community conversation. On Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at, is it Beck? We've done Rosa and Crucy. I think it's at Beck. It's at, where is it? Is it Crucy? It's Sunday. Yeah, the Sunday's at Crucy, right? Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at Crucy. Again, community conversation about referendum and the work that we're doing in the district. And then Tuesday night, the 20th, at 7 o'clock at Crucy for the discussion. Right? So lots of time. Listen, if you can't get enough of this, come out to one of those meetings. There'll be a lot of discussion to go through. And again, it is a dialogue and a discussion about where we are and what we're doing. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you for the, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Matlack and Mrs. Scarpolino, thank you, and have a great evening, folks.